All right, Jon Rudd, welcome to the podcast, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, Brett. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, listen, it's been we've been playing back and forward. I've been trying to get you on for a while, so I'm glad we could nail this down. Where are you at right now?
I'm in Dublin, Ireland, trying to sort out a few bits and pieces following the European Championships to get the new season started, and then hopefully get a little bit of leave because I've not managed to get any yet this summer.
We just went through some of the things that you do behind the scenes as well, not only on the deck, but my God, you've got a lot of things going on. So I'd imagine you're ready for a little break.
Yeah, I think we all get to that point, don't we, in that sort of end of July, August period where you start to run on fumes. And
Yeah.
the European Championships for us were late. We also had a Commonwealth Games for the Northern Ireland athletes.
Right.
And then, we've got to put the season in a place where it will start successfully from September. So that all needs doing. And then once we're in that position, yeah, we'll get a little downtime.
Yeah. Okay. Look, let's talk about the role that you're in now with Swim Ireland. You're the performance director there. So, how did this all come about? I mean, you're British, but obviously a position like this comes open. Did they come after you? Did you have to put in an application of any sorts, or is it just like, hey, we want you to come and lead this for us?
No, I applied. I don't know that what Ireland may or may not have known about me at that time, but leading into Rio and then after Rio, I was really conscious that I wanted to try something new. I'd done the same thing in the same place for best part of 30 years. And I'd achieved a lot of my coaching ambitions, all those things that I'd set myself around international medals and world records and stuff like that, they'd been done. And I was in this weird position that not many people get to, where it was like, well, I've done everything that I intended to do. Am I motivated to just go and see if I can do it again? And I think it could have been, but what I was really motivated by was an opportunity like this where I could help other people to try and experience what I'd experienced. And my choices were limited. I can only speak English, so it had to be an English-speaking nation, and then the Ireland thing came up, and so it was maybe written in the stars that was the opportunity for me, and I applied, and here I am.
Wow. I want to get into that more, but you said something about coaching ambition. That's interesting, because I talk to a lot of coaches on this podcast, and I try and get that out of them. And very few coaches are willing to kind of talk about coaching ambition, but it's something that gets you out of bed in the morning. Like I had it, I'm sure, for sure I had it. I think you get to a point where any person wants to be competitive. Any person wants to achieve greatness, especially at our level. Like we're dealing with kind of the 1% of all swimming, right? Like once you get to the peak of where we are in the swimming world, you're dealing with the best athletes in the world. And so you have your own ambitions, I guess. So I like the fact that you admitted that you had some ambitions to achieve success. And I imagine, when I look at your resume, I see Olympic gold medal coach. I mean, why not aim for that, right?
Absolutely. I always say to people that there was a point in time where I was a good coach, and I did things the way that I did them, having been taught by some great people and chatting to great coaches around the world. And I did things my way, and I was seen as a good coach. And then there was one day where that clicked with an athlete, and I didn't change really anything that I did. And then the next day I was a great coach. And I'm like, so I always struggle with that a little bit, that you define sometimes by your athletes, or defined by your athletes' medals or records or whatever else, because I wasn't a different coach the day after an Olympic gold medal as I was the day before, but my coaching status changed. So look, I set about wanting the best swimming program in my particular area of England, and then when that was achieved, it was like, okay, I want the best swimming program in the country, and we achieved that for several years in a row. And then it was, okay, so that's done. I now want to coach medals. I want to step on the teams and see athletes onto podiums, and there isn't a gold medal that I could coach that I haven't. and I've coached 3 world records and a whole bunch of European and Commonwealth records. So at that point, I honestly, looked at what my ambitions were when I started and how they evolved, and like, right, well, I've done them. And those coaches that are able to go and win the cup for a 3rd time or a 4th time or a 5th time, or set about things maybe with the same athlete or a different athlete to try and achieve something they've already achieved. I have a massive amount of respect for them, because there was just something in me that went, I need to do something different to maintain a motivation and a love for this sport. And that's why I do what I do now.
Yeah. I like that. I can relate to a lot of that. I was in a weird situation where I came into coaching kind of under the guise of some incredible coaches. I got very fortunate to kind of fall in line underneath David Marsh and Richard Quick, 2 of the greatest in history. So I guess my fortune lied in kind of just where I fell. And then David kind of put Cesar Cielo in my lap. And then a couple of years later, here we are winning a gold medal. So for me, things happened extremely quickly. And I can relate to the fact where you said one day I'm coaching, and then the next day my credentials say I'm an Olympic gold medal coach, and all of a sudden everybody thinks I'm so much better than I actually was. Like I felt like I was a good coach, but I didn't feel like I was the best in the world necessarily. There was so much to learn, and I was just experimenting. So I think you're right. Like, there are things that you achieve along the way that can elevate your status, but then you're always coming back to, like, well, how do I get better? How can I improve? How can I help these people understand that there's still so much to go, and maybe you have success with this person, but doesn't guarantee success with that person. And then every individual is a little different too. So in regards to that, like, in terms of just establishing things that you feel make you a great coach, and kind of create separation with some other coaches, what are the things that Jon Rudd does well on a daily basis that they're always your go-to things that you just go back to?
I'll start with patience. There's no doubt that unless an Olympic champion or an Olympic medalist from the previous games drops in your lap, and they're clearly on an upwards trajectory and of an age profile where you have to do something really bad for them not to win an Olympic medal again, these things don't drop in your lap. But if you're in a system where you're creating athletes rather than inheriting them, you have to have patience, and you have to be really flexible and agile in the way that you look at things. So I coached a good bunch of female breaststrokers in my time, and a good bunch of male sprint freestylers in my time. And there was a couple of athletes that were the cream of the crop of those, but there was subtle differences of what we had to do with some of those guys that were aspiring to that level. And so you have to be on your toes, and you have to be open to thinking almost every day, if not every session, that self-reflection piece on, I planned this, then we actually did this because I modified it when they hit the water. And then at the end of it, what could have been better? If I went back and had that 2-hour period again, that 3-hour period again, or whatever it might be, how would we start it different? Where would we progress it differently? And like making notes and stuff where you can go back and challenge yourself. Because I honestly think the greatest exponent of learning is from your previous self. But that doesn't mean that when you get the opportunity to speak to guys that have been there, done it many times, are the serial achievers in coaching, you absolutely have to listen to them. You have to get past the bar stories and the war stories and the pats on the back and actually get to some substance sometimes. But if you can get to that with them, there's always something to learn. And I also believe that great coaching is there's an element which is theft, which is where every time you speak to someone, there'll be something that you take. And you take this and you take that and you take the other and you piece them together, and it makes your own coaching profile and your own coaching style. That's what makes you unique. But I think that we're not good at times as a group of coaches of recognizing where we took snippets and ideas and little bits and pieces from, because the way that we do things is part us and part what we've learned, seen, heard from others. And that's
John, that's why I have a podcast. I steal every day.
There you go.
No, you're right. You're right. Like that is it, but there's also a time, I guess, where your athletes have to understand, what you're doing too, right? Like, and this is your signature. Like, this is Jon Rudd. Like, this is what I know, and this is the way I do it. And it works. And so how did you get to that point in your career where you knew your signature, you were so confident in the way that you were doing things that you had to get your athletes to believe that as well, right? Like, that's part of the challenge too, is like an athlete's going to come in with doubts, and you almost have to prove yourself in a way to say, like, look, I know this works, right?
Yeah. And look, the obvious answer is look at the results. But there'll always be guys that come into your coaching program where they're the one, or that, you hope it's a small number, but they're the one, or they're within that small group that don't make the progress that's expected and anticipated. And I think, again, another great coaching attribute is recognizing when that's the case and saying to them, I don't know whether you shouldn't try something else, because I really think I know what I'm doing. But it doesn't seem to be working for you. And I think a lot of coaches hang on to athletes for that reflected glory rather than what's best for that individual.
Right.
So there's a strong, moral or ethical strand that needs to be in place in coaching. If we recognize that the athletes in our care have a really limited window of opportunity, that if all we're doing is trying to find a way to keep them in our program so that we get some kind of status and kudos from it,
right,
that potentially we're not doing them the right service. So there's a point in time, and if you're good coaches with a small number, where you maybe say to them, look, have you thought about doing something else? But if your results are good, your culture's strong within your program, you have all of those kind of the things that we talk about with coaches. You're approachable, and you individualize, and your mood is stable. All of those kind of things, and then athletes will respond. But I don't think that we can ever really walk on deck with a plan on a given day that's going to satisfy 30 or 40 athletes in the pool.
Yeah,
there has to be some bespoke nature to what we're doing, or we only reach a limited number. And then with the others, then we're providing them with a disservice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was a challenge in college, right? In college, coaches have this challenge where the groups are so big. You got 30 men, 30 women, and obviously you have assistant coaches. And so the best college programs in America, delegate and allocate certain swimmers to certain coaches. And, you might have a situation where the team's maybe doing something on a particular day, but then the majority of the time you've got to split, right? Like, because athletes have to have individual attention. They have to have certain groups that they're working with, and they have to build up a rapport with a certain coach. And there's no way one head coach in a college program can have that kind of relationship with 60 athletes. It just can't happen. So that was certainly a challenge in college. And I'd imagine in some of these big programs, around the country, like I'm thinking, like Dean Boxall right now in Australia, like he's got this incredible group, and you've got to find time for each one of those athletes. And so the best coaches do manage that well. But then even when I talk to Dean, he says to some of his athletes, like, this might not be the place for you, right? Like, you might need to go somewhere else to get what you need specifically. So the best coaches are doing that. One of the things that interests me about your background is, like, in swimming, a lot of it is about the physiology, right? Like, when we do these presentations and we listen to coaches, it's a lot about the training and how do you, what kind of program do you have? How much do you work? When do you work? How are you balancing this? And those sorts of things. The physiology of training is very heavy in swimming, but you have a doctorate in psychology. Why did you go down the psychology route? And what's the difference between kind of a psychology degree and being a doctor of psychology? That interests me.
Well, I went down the psychology route because I felt that I'd always been a psychologist, and that I don't have a lot of strengths, right? I don't know how to change a tire on a car, and if someone asked me to put up some shelves in the kitchen, I wouldn't have a clue. But I'm good at watching people and listening to people and understanding what might be behind their words. I think I am. So that really interested me, and so just for my own sort of, like stimulation, if you like, of wanting to achieve something that I could sort of pat myself on the back for, but also flush out whether I did have an ability in this area. That was something that I wanted to do, and it's interested me a lot more than physiology or some of the other like sciencey type areas that might
biomechanics and stuff.
But and I also think that sometimes it's not the message, or it's not the set, or it's not the part of the set or the session or whatever. It's the manner in which it's delivered. So, I can walk on a deck, another coach can walk on a deck, and another coach can walk on a deck, all with the same bit of paper, all with the same session on, for the same athlete, and the manner in which we deliver it, we get different outcomes. And that's really interesting to me, that X number of 100s at a particular intensity with a particular heart rate on a particular stroke, with some other bits and pieces in there around rates and counts and whatever that may be. That's only the beginning. If that's as basic as we are, then this sport has got way further to evolve. What makes a difference is whether Bret Hawke walks on deck, or whether Jon Rudd walks on deck, or whether Bob Bowman walks on deck, or whatever it might be. That's what makes a difference. So I'm really interested in that area. And the other area that really fires me up is we had a quick conversation after the 100 free world record in Rome. I'm really, really interested in those people that come along and just change the sport, where it's stuff where maybe they don't even know what they're doing to change it, and those working around with them are still trying to work out what it is, because it's some kind of wonderful new thing that they have in their relationship with the water. And certainly those of us that are outside of that are trying to work it out even more. That stuff really, really interests me, because unless those people come along, the world records are going to stagnate, and those fantastic swims that we've got used to seeing will just become fewer and fewer and fewer. Particularly now we don't have the suits and whatever else that are aiding those. So that stuff really interests me, and seeing that 100 freestyle world record go in Rome live was something there where, if anyone needed a kick in the pants as to why A, you should continue to love the sport, and B, you should continue to recognize that the books are not closed. There's so much more we got to learn. There's an example of it.
We individualize training in the pool, so why not individualize your nutrition? Erica Beine of Beine Wellness Building will help you and your swimmers get exactly what each athlete needs through genetic testing and personalized nutrition plans. So stop guessing what you should and shouldn't be putting into your body. Athletes within a few weeks have noticed they're recovering faster because they're fueling their body with what they need and staying away from what their body hates. Erica understands swimming. She gets it. She's worked with over 20 Olympians, including the fastest man in the world, Caleb Dressel. Group discounts are available, so go to Beine Wellness Building and get in touch with Erica today. That's Beine, B-E-I-N-E, wellnessbuilding.net. Swim Angelfish. Swim Angelfish is an online certification program that strengthens your teaching curriculum to serve swimmers of all abilities. Swim Angelfish will prepare you and your instructors with the skills to teach swimmers with autism, physical disabilities, anxiety, sensory and motor conditions, and more. Learn to teach skills faster and with more comfort with Swim Angelfish. Apply for an Only Alpha Pool Product Scholarship and receive up to 50% off your certification. Go to swimangelfish.com today to apply. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's blowing us all away. I've had conversations with some of the greatest sprinters in history now over this world record, some of the best coaches in history, including yourself. And we're all not scratching our heads. We're very thankful that David's come along and kind of set this new paradigm. And it's always good. You know, you've had an athlete like that. Rūta came along in breaststroke and did that on the women's side as well. So it's like you see these athletes come along sometimes and just shift the paradigm and shift your thinking, because you're so stuck in like, okay, like you said, here's the formula of you got to do this, 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 and this is how you get to that. And then all of a sudden this guy comes along, and I'm talking to Alex Popov, and he's like, I have no idea how you swim 46 seconds. And this is the greatest sprint freestyler in history, has no idea how to do it. And so we're all like, I don't know, you know? So it's so cool to see. I imagine, I mean, I'm so jealous of you being standing on the deck and just kind of taking that all in the crowd in Rome and watching that. But, I mean, you talk about psychology. When I talk to Popovici, a lot of it is just about what are you thinking and how do you think? Because how does a 17-year-old think to themselves, I can swim faster than any man in human history? You know, how do you even think that at 17? I can start to understand it when you're a full-grown man, maybe like 22, 23, and you've had worlds of experience, and then you start to kind of fall into this belief. But this kid, in a way, and I don't like to call him a kid because he's a man now, but like this kid is thinking beyond his years. And the only other person I've met like that who's done that for me was Richard Quick. Richard Quick was always a 10-year ahead thinker. He thought way beyond where I could think, and he could see it and he could feel it. And I imagine you're probably very similar to that in terms of the psychology of the sport. I'm sure that you kind of fall into that realm a little bit, wouldn't you think?
Well, the first thing I'd say about that swim, which I don't think has been sort of reported enough, is that venue is not an easy venue to swim fast in.
Mm.
You know, it was windy a lot of the time. When it wasn't boiling hot, it was raining. Right. And so the environment in terms of the crowd was sensational, but in terms of a pure let's swim fast environment, it's got its challenges. Mm-hmm. You know, so you could argue that swim's 0.2, 0.3 quicker in an indoor venue in you know an optimal setting. Mm. The second thing that I think is the bit that is the most intriguing to me is it's the front to back 50. You know, the drop off is so negligible from what we've seen from the fastest guys in the world in that event, and that's why his 200 so good, obviously. Mm. That's a whole new piece, because most sprinters, I think, spend their lives working out how they hold it together down the back 50. This guy's got to work out how he holds it together down the back 50, not change that, but how he gets out quicker, because he isn't out sensationally quick. But the second 50 is just a new level, a new level. I also think from what you raised there, which is a really important point, with youth comes naivety, and with naivety sometimes comes easier performances. Because I'm not sure that I'd be interested to know whether if he went out to that race with a coach's voice in his ears or his own voice in his head saying, I'm going to break the world record. I don't know that helps an athlete ever. But what does help is I'm going to dive in and be the best version of myself today. And that has the capacity to break a world record. And so it's a slightly nuanced concept of going out to a race of I don't think I can lose. B, I'm in the best form of my life. C, I've proved that across the rounds. And D, all I have to do is dive in and structure my race in the best way that my body and my abilities suggest I should. Because this isn't a big guy, you know. The S&C guys must be looking at this and wondering whether they're out of work for these sprinters, but having seen him, you know, and I'm sure they're not. But this is someone that hasn't achieved this through necessarily force that's been learned in the gym. This is a guy that when he puts his hand on the water, the force that he generates, that's aquatic specific force, is just another level. His relationship with the water is potentially the best we've ever seen from an athlete ever. That's the thing we have to learn. So I don't know that he walked out going, right, I'm going to break this world record. But I would suspect and hope that he walked out going, I'm going to swim faster than I've ever swum before.
Yeah.
By the things I've learned from the heat and the semi-final. And if I do that, the world record's on the cards.
Right. You're leading a nation now, Swim Ireland, where you kind of are hoping for a very similar effect to maybe the Popovici effect in Romania. I watched their relay team at the World Juniors. I think it's World Juniors now. I'm having trouble keeping up with where he's at and what's on the calendar right now. But World Juniors in Lima, Peru. The Romanians win the 4x100 freestyle. So I imagine this kind of almost Popovici effect is having an effect on the guys around him and the people and the belief system of these young men. You know, for them to win the world title at the World Juniors is extraordinary. And then I'm sure you maybe even seen this with Rūta and maybe Lithuania. I saw it with Caesar in Brazil. You know, so you have this effect here. Is this kind of similar to what you're hoping may happen in Ireland, or is it happening? And tell us about what's going on in Ireland and where it's at right now.
Well, there isn't a performance director or a head coach of a nation that doesn't dream for the equivalent guy to walk through their doors and put their tracksuit and their cap on. And it's what we're all aspiring to find, you know, one or more of that talent. Some of it's by luck and by chance. You know, we're grateful that guy didn't take up badminton or take up volleyball, or because great athletes are great athletes. So there's a good chance that he would have been, you know, successful in anything that he chose to do. Would he have been a world record holder? Maybe not. But, you know, those sliding doors moments of those guys choosing your sport is really, really important. In Ireland, we have a particular challenge because we have a sport that isn't really played anywhere else. A bit like Aussie rules that isn't really played anywhere else. We have Gaelic football and we have and hurling, and that sucks up a lot of the athletic talent in the nation, and that hurts every sport. And then nobody really gets to see those guys be world beaters in something because there isn't a world level event for those sports. It's an inter-county event within the nation. So that's a challenge that we all face. But I think the one thing that we have in swimming over and above any other sport is that we're a retention sport and not a recruitment sport. Everybody has to learn to swim. You would say that 9.9 people out of 10 actually do learn to swim in the 21st century. If they all walk through our doors at some point, it's our job as a national governing body, as coaches in clubs or programs, to identify them when they walk through the door, find an energy and an effort to visit the Learn to Swim program or the junior program more regularly, and make sure those kids are sold a dream and given some kind of inspirational message of what it is that you might see in them, so that after their 6 weeks or their 10 weeks or their 12 weeks of swimming, they don't tick that box and go on and do the next thing on the agenda, you know, learn the piano or whatever that might be that their parents have in store for them. That's the key bit for us. Whereas other sports don't have that. Other sports don't have this natural throughput of young people that's close to the entire population come through their doors. And I don't know that as a sport, particularly in a lot of nations, we've learned how to tap that.
What kind of support do you guys give them so that they're not walking away to these other sports, so that you can retain them? Do you get support? Are you fighting for more support? Like, you know, where are you at with that? Because obviously it's difficult. Like you're not only competing to keep them away from those other sports, but you're competing to keep them away from maybe even leaving Ireland and coming to America or other situations. So like, there's got to be a foundation for where you are to say, look, we're good enough here. We can give you what you need. We can get the results. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in the first instance around the, you know, trying to keep them in swimming,
Right.
We all know that's a challenge. There's nothing pretty or romantic about burying your face in chlorinated water for 20 hours a week when you're a youngster, and that ultimate goal is 10, 15 years or more down the track. So, we have to be really creative and thought-provoking with young people as to why they might want to do this. So the competition calendar, domestically and internationally, is really important for that, and finding ways that it's more than just medals, because there's only 3 guys that can win a medal, and the 11-year-old that wins the medal may not be the guy that should be stepping onto the senior national team 10, 15 years later. So we have to be creative in that way. In terms of our national program and athletes choosing international programs, I strongly believe that in 9 out of 10 nations, and ours included, that the people that care the most about in our case, the green jacket and stepping onto an Irish team, the people who care about it the most and give it the most attention are Irish people and Irish programs. So on that basis, it's my belief that that's the best place for them to be. But we also recognize that people, when they get to 18, 19 years of age, want to spread their wings sometimes and try something new and have a life experience and, go to a different culture and a different climate and try something different. So we don't hold them back and we don't penalize them for that. We continue to support them the best we can if they're at the other side of the world or they're elsewhere in Europe. But we still believe that, for Irish kids to do the best that they can on a senior international level, Ireland's the best place for them.
Right.
So we educate and advise, but ultimately each individual makes their own decision, and we support them best we can, whatever their decision may be.
Do you guys have some traditional heroes in swimming that you can fall back on? Like in Brazil, we had Gustavo Borges, right? Like it was easy to kind of fall back on him and say that's a national hero. I don't know enough about Irish swimming to say that these are the people that you rely on to say, like, dream big, be like that person. So who would be the kind of the heroes of Irish swimming that kids can look up to?
I think that it depends how far you go back, but names like Gary O'Toole, Gráinne Murphy, Andrew Bree, these kind of characters would be people that the Irish would look up to and remember and hold in high reverence. And Andrew Bree is coaching in one of our centres now, which is great. Ireland don't have many double Olympians in swimming, and he's one of them. So I would say that we're actually in the position now with the likes of Mona McSharry and Daniel Whiffen, Ellen Walsh, that we're potentially in the process of rewriting or adding to who those luminaries are.
Right.
The fact that Mona and Ellen both won medals at the World Short Course in December of 21. That's not happened that often. There's only Shane Ryan that's achieved that before. Daniel Whiffen's Northern Ireland's first ever Commonwealth Games medal. These are big deals for Irish swimming. We're a small nation in population. Having our first relay and Olympic Games in 50 years in Tokyo, that was a big deal. So they're stepping stones to where we want to be. Is it the end product? No. Does it help us get to the end product? Yes. Yeah.
I guess then there's a way. In my mind, then you'd want to kind of parade them around a little bit and kind of put them out into the public and say, like, go and talk to kids, go and be on national television or whatever it is, like, to really get it out there to say, like, these young up and coming athletes are heroes and you want to aspire to them. Is that kind of part of the mentality or not in Ireland? I'm not sure, how do they go about kind of praising, athletes?
Sure. So, as the governing body for swimming, we would absolutely want to do that as often as possible in as many different areas as possible. Sometimes getting media to be interested in our sport is tough, and I think other nations find a similar challenge. We're not a national sport like we might be in some other nations. But we would completely want and support that. It's always a balance between that exposure for them and for the sport, and not compromising their training and their education and those kind of things. There is a fine line that we have to walk, but it's totally something that we are doing, and maybe we should be doing it more. And it's something that we'll always aspire to in terms of promoting them, promoting the sport, promoting what can be achieved if you join the sport.
Yeah. Well, mate, you got someone there that has kind of laid the foundations for how to do it in Conor McGregor. I don't know if you want to end up following his complete track, but certainly early on with some of the things that he was doing to promote himself was definitely caught on. But he's a character. I don't know if we have anyone like that in swimming. I'll talk to Shane Ryan about it. We'll get him going. Now, listen, you are the president of the World Swimming Coaches Association, and I want to say this in a way that doesn't insult you, but like I don't know what that means exactly. You know what I mean? It's like I guess they're not as visible as or as well known in terms of what they do. So, like, educate me on what that means exactly.
The president's position is kind of chair of the board, if we want to put it that way. The World Swimming Coaches Association is in the main a voluntary organization with its sort of basic membership package being free. Mm-hmm. So its bank account is pretty small. There's only one employee of the World Swimming Coaches Association, and that's something that we've got to constantly get some money together and sponsors and so on together to maintain that particular person's role. But I suppose what we're trying to achieve, and it's pretty slow, is to advocate for coaches and to support them as best we can, to promote the education and development of coaches. But the reason that maybe the likes of yourself and other coaches in the most developed swimming nations would not have the strongest relationship with the World Swimming Coaches Association is we try and do our work primarily in the nations that don't have a coaches association. Right. So America have ASCA, and Britain have the BSCA, and Australia have the ASCTA, and so on. So we'll have a relationship with them, and we'll support them and work with them as and when they need it. But those coaches are looked after by a national coaches association. Right. But if you go into certain parts of Europe, or the majority of Africa, or into Asia, there's, in South America, there's a lot of nations where coaches don't have someone to go to and don't have a metaphorical arm around their shoulder if they need it. And that's where we will do the majority of our work. And if those nations end up in a position where they create their own coaches association, that's great, because what we've done then is, we've stimulated and catalyzed something that is what we would like to see in every swimming nation. So, we're the membership's big. It's hundreds of thousands of coaches, and we chip away with education pieces, and we were a strong advocacy around the whole transgender piece that went to FINA, and FINA's ultimate call on what would happen with the transgender piece aligned with that we sent into them. Whether we had an influence of some kind, I would hope so. But the fact that we came out with a similar result that we were suggesting suggests that we had an influence. And so the key is we're independent. We're independent to FINA, we're independent to any of the continental associations, and we're independent to national federations. And that gives coaches a place to come to, like they might do with ASCA or the BSCA, and say, guys, can you help me out here?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Like, I started this podcast as kind of just an interest, and something that I wanted to do, just to talk to coaches. I love having conversations like this, by the way, and I appreciate you sharing. What I've learned over time is that this is one of the best educational pieces in swimming, right? And I've been somewhat surprised that organizations like the one that you're the president of and others haven't kind of come to me and said, like, let's partner in terms of like getting these messages out, because like I'm having this beautiful conversation with you who's the president of the World Swimming Coaches Association, and people should be listening, right? And so I would think that part of swimming education would be listening to podcasts like this, where I bring on Bob Bowman, I bring on David Marsh, I bring on David Popovici, and I get inside their heads, you know? So, yeah, I don't know. I just threw that out there, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that, but it's to me, it's like, as I've done these, I've like, wow, these are so educational. You know what I mean?
Couldn't agree with you more, Brett. And yeah, maybe we're remiss in not coming to you, you know, with that sort of request. You know, there's a whole bunch of swimming podcasts out there, and you know, yours is great, and others are great too. But yeah, I'd take your point. I'd take your point on board. Look, the bottom line is with World Swimming Coaches Association is we're all voluntary guys, right? We've all got daytime jobs.
Yeah.
So what we can do is what we're doing in an evening or at a weekend or whatever else, just because we love the sport and we love to support coaches. So you know, if we were all full-time employees of that association, then I'd be happy to be hit over the head with a stick a little bit more on something like that. But
yeah,
no. But look, if,
I didn't mean to beat you on the head with it. It just comes to me because I have these incredible conversations. I'm like, man, I wish we'd get these out more, because like I'm talking to Jon Rudd right now, and he's telling me about, you know, all this incredible stuff. I'd love for people to tap into it more, you know. So anyway, that's that. We can get off it. Event, heat, lane, name of swimmer, times and places. It's called Swim Nerd Live, and it allows the data and times from your actual scoreboard to be broadcast and viewed in real time on any smart TV, phone, or other device. There are so many things you can do with this software. A very simple and easy to use necessity for any team or facility that is live streaming their meets results. One click on any device and they're watching your swim meet live in real time. Go to swimpractice.com to learn more. In terms of this, then, I got something else that came up. I talked to Tim Hinchy, who's the president of USA Swimming, and he brought up this fact that he's very concerned about this global calendar. How much of this talk is amongst you know, all the different varying associations that you are part of as well? It's definitely a challenge. Like I said, I couldn't even remember where Popovici is swimming right now. He's at the World Junior Championships in Peru, I believe, but I mean, the meets that he's gone to, and I mean, we just had junior hand packs, I think, in Hawaii. I mean, there's all sorts of different meets going on all over the world. And it just seems like the swimmers have no idea where they're going next, what's happening, how they're going to get to that meet, to this meet, to the. There seems to be some fighting about next year's World Championships. I think there's 2 World Championships next year. Or maybe the year after. I'm not sure. The calendar just seems to be all over the place. So where are we with that?
Well, the calendar is all over the place, and look, without sounding like a politician, it's nobody's fault. You know, the reason it's all over the place is a worldwide pandemic, and governing bodies are desperately trying to hold on to what was planned for a year and accommodate that was cancelled or postponed or pushed back or whatever because of a pandemic. But it is a little bit chaotic, and there's an awful lot of stuff going on top of each other that you know, is a concern for athlete welfare and well-being. It's a concern for how governing bodies, national federations actually manage budgets, particularly smaller nations.
Right.
You know, there's that, and what we're having to do, you know, maybe bar the top 10 swimming nations in the world, everybody else is looking at the calendar and going, so where do we draw a line? You know, what we're going to focus on, what are we not going to do? And that's a pity, you know, because in any nation you have the world stuff, then you have your continental stuff, then you have subcontinental stuff, and then you have your own national and domestic program to look after as well. You have junior events, youth events, senior events, multi-sport events. So these are difficult times, and there's I suppose the biggest thing is there's contracts that have been signed with certain nations to hold certain events where the money's already sloshing around in the system somewhere, and their event didn't take place because of COVID, and nobody wants to breach that contract because of, you know, the financial consequences and whatever else. So yeah, it's messy, and it's not ideal. The key thing I think now is, you know, FINA have put an athlete commission in place. LEN, the European body, have put an athlete commission in place, and they've both said that they really want to listen to those guys, and that they're there for a purpose, and not just because it's the politically correct thing to see. So I'd want to see the athlete voice come to the fore here, and those commissions, you know, really make strong representation on behalf of athlete welfare and psychological health and physical health, and in terms of, you know, what's going on out there, because there'll be a point in time where we get back to something that's regularity, but we also then need to take that opportunity to make regularity fit for purpose, because I'm not even sure that regularity was 100% fit for purpose. But where we are now is, yeah, there's a lot of reactionary stuff that's happening. You know, like you mentioned, the Worlds in Doha in February 2024. There isn't a single person out in the world that thinks that's a great idea. But there's a contract signed somewhere that requires that competition to take place in a particular time frame. And if
I think there's a world short course coming up in Melbourne in a few months as well. It's like
so we've got the response to the Russian-Ukraine situation of certain meets not being able to take place in certain venues.
Right.
So meets get moved because, you know, we know that Russia has been a strong exponent of hosting European and world swimming events. So if they're off the calendar for now or for a considerable period, things get shuffled around. So you've got that in the equation. You've got events that didn't take place because of the pandemic and get pushed back a year or get pushed back 2 years, and you end up with a bottleneck. And so we have to navigate that. We have to navigate that well, but it's for coaches and athletes in particular to guide the bodies that are making those decisions so that we get the best out of what is a very difficult situation.
It is, yeah, it is. It's very difficult. You brought something up there in terms of Russia that kind of sparked my thinking. Like, it's sad, right? Like, it's sad. There's a lot of really good Russian swimmers, and then here we have a situation with Ukraine, and it's so messy and ugly, and you don't even want to touch it, you know. And but at the same time, you know, we care about swimming. You and I, we care about swimming. We love the swimming at its peak, right? And so, like, to have a whole group of athletes that aren't even in that picture right now, it's sad, you know. Like, it's sad, but the bigger picture is it's sad that there's a war going on too. Like, that's the even bigger picture. But yeah, I don't know. Like, how do you feel about the whole Russian situation yourself? Like, I don't even know when those athletes are going to be able to come back at all. You know, like, it could be kind of almost like the end of a career for a lot of these athletes.
Yeah, it is an extremely sad situation, and there's no doubt about it that, you know, in a European Championships or a World Championships, you want all eligible nations present.
Right.
That's the utopian situation. We're not in a utopian world. I put a caveat on that we only want nations there if they're clean. Right. So, you know, we've got certain nations that have a reputation for using substances that they shouldn't do, and you know, so we want every nation that's eligible to race and is doing it fair playing field and ethically sound for the sport, clean nations. We want them present. But I also think that FINA and LEN have done absolutely the right thing in the case of this particular war. You know, I don't want to call it a conflict. It's a war, and it's an unlawful war. And on that basis, if one of the measures that we as a sport can use to make the government of that nation, and maybe maybe Belarus too, those two nations, to internally reflect on what they're doing. And the decision is, if you're going to do this, then you're not welcome. If that's a decision we make that helps shorten or stop that conflict over time, then it's the right decision. It's extremely hard on those individuals, those athletes, those teams that are now not able to compete. But if those voices are part of the throng in those nations that says, hey, this can't be right because this is happening to us, and that makes governments and leaders think twice, then I think it's a cross that would all be willing to bear for the better good of what's going on in the world. And at the end of the day, this is only swimming and only sport, which is minute in comparison to people losing their lives, losing their families, losing their livelihoods, losing their homes. They're not on the same page.
Yeah, well said, mate. I'm glad you put it that way. I couldn't have articulated it as well as you did, so I appreciate that. That's well said. I want to get onto something super positive then, in terms of Ben Proud. He had a year, right? Like, he had a year. This kid just went on and separated himself, I believe, with the rest of the world this year in terms of being the #1 sprint freestyler in the 50 freestyle in terms of power and speed and explosiveness. This is the guy now, and it's so cool to see. I was talking to James Gibson about him, congratulating him, and I was actually telling him I'm going to have you on the podcast. He said, mate, Jon was a massive, massive influence in Ben Proud's career, obviously. So first of all, congrats on that and everything Ben has achieved. But just tell us a little bit about Ben. He's really special, mate.
He is. I mean, I haven't coached Ben now for 5 years. So the last time I was coaching him was into Rio 2016. But in that period, and I coached him from about 15 years of age through to Rio. The memories of coaching him are just like the most sublime memories as a coach, because he's just the easiest guy in the world to coach, because he'd trust in you, or he wouldn't be with you. And the manner in which he questioned sometimes what he might be doing and whether it could be changed was done in such a gentle and honorable fashion that it was that situation where, yeah, I'll change this, Ben, not a problem, because you've gone about it in such the right way as an athlete.
Right.
He was, and I believe continues to be, the ultimate professional. If every swimmer in the world lived and behaved like Ben Proud, they'd all be faster than they are now, because it was literally 24/7, 365 days a year of diligence, professionalism, and that whole concept of every decision you make, it's either a positive effect on you or it's a negative effect on you. There's nothing that just keeps neutral. Every decision. And he just loaded the professional side of the road and the positive side of the road. When it came to nutrition and hydration and sleep and social life, and just ticked every single box. Did it mean that he was a robot and he didn't enjoy life? No, he did. But yeah, just such a super guy. The term gentleman has got lost in everyday language as to what a gentleman is, and its original origins is a gentle man. Yeah, and that's what Ben is. He's a gentle giant. He's unbelievably respectful, a pleasure to be around. I couldn't have enjoyed coaching anybody any more than coaching Ben, and we made him quick, and James Gibson made him quicker. And that was great to see too. I mean, I couldn't have handed him on to a better guy than James. James and I did a lot of stuff together whilst we were both based in England. Bounced off each other a lot, and would be good friends as well as colleagues. So it was fantastic that, Ben, I think you should go to James. James wanted to coach him. Happy days. But the greatest exponent of Ben Proud's abilities and Ben Proud's speed is himself.
Yeah.
He is a self-managed, self-reliant, self-aware individual beyond compare.
Right. And I love that about him, because what he's doing, I swam for Australia back in, the early 2000s, where you had the Ian Thorpes, the Grant Hackett's, the Kieran Perkins, like the 1500, the 400, it was kind of like, that was what everybody aspired to, because we had these heroes, true heroes, right? And I swam the 50 freestyle, and it was looked upon, it was looked down upon. First of all, it wasn't even looked at as a real event. It was looked at as somebody who's just, stands up on the blocks and hopes for the best, And I was like, this, first of all, it's a real event. Second of all, like the best people win, right? And I think this is what Ben is doing now. Ben's proving the best people win. He's won the Commonwealths this year. He's won the world title. He's won the European title. He's won the triple crown, right, in the swimming world. And what he's proving is that the best people win consistently in the 50 freestyle. It's not a crapshoot. It's not a hope for the best. It's not a anyone can win this thing. Cesar Cielo didn't have that opinion. Cesar thought, I'm racing one, maybe two guys here, and the rest of them have no chance. And I'm sure that's the way Ben's kind of getting up on the block now, not looking down on his competition, but saying, I'm so good at what I do. I've created separation with everybody else. You don't have a chance to beat me unless you do all these things, right, that are better than me. And you can't do it because I do it so well all the time. And that's what I love about what Ben is doing here. He's proving that you need to be extremely professional to do what he's doing and compete at the level he's competing at and be as consistent as he is. And he's showing the rest of the world that it is not a hope or a crapshoot or just get up on the block and anyone can win this thing as long as you pull the water as harder than the next person. It's a science here, and it's an art, and I'm just so glad he's doing what he's doing.
There's so much in what you say there, Brett. I think that Ben, we worked on this for a long time, and I'm sure this still resonates with him, that, your lane is your space. And it doesn't matter if you're in the middle lane, it doesn't matter what's going on with the 4 guys to your left and the 3 guys to your right, or whatever that might be. Your piece of water is your piece. There's something to be said if you've not got a great start, that you should be on the left lane line or the right lane line in the first 20 meters. But his start was so brutally good that he was just down the middle of the lane. Yeah. It's your own process. And the moment you're conscious of what's happening to the left or right of you is the moment that your rate changes, or you miss a catch, or, the hundredths of a second error creep in. So you blinker yourself completely from what's taking place. And he was able to do that. And I remember, he was a young man when he won his first Commonwealth gold. It was 2014 in Glasgow. I think he was only 19 years of age. And he had Roland Schumann to one side of him and George Bovell to the other side of him. And George was shadow boxing and, trying to put this young guy off. And Ben was just like, I just do my thing. Yeah. And he's been like that ever since. And the other great thing about him is he's had some tough times where he hasn't got the result that he wanted or expected, particularly in the Olympics. 2016, he was 4th. Which would have hurt him. And then he didn't have a great Tokyo either. But everything either side of those has been fantastic. But that hasn't affected him. He's just gone, okay, pick up again, we go again, and we get it right next time. And so there's nobody in that event that deserves an Olympic medal come Paris more than he does. Yeah,
that's going to be that's going to be fun. It's always fun. The Olympic final is always a cool one. But again, I want him to be kind of one of those guys who is in, where you say it's between these 3 guys, right? And Ben's definitely going to be one of those guys. So if there's a 50 freestyler out there and You got 2 years till Paris. You better start figuring it out now, because Ben Proud's going to be in that top 3 conversation 2 years from now, no doubt. So that only leaves 2 other spots for the conversation. So you better be working now, or you're going to get left out of that conversation. So yeah, it's really interesting. I love to see it. You know, he's peppering that 21 flat mark as well. You know, and I think it's only a matter of time before he has that ultimate breakthrough. Like, I think he's coming for that world record. You know, like I saw him in Rome actually swim a 21.1, and again, it's not I don't think it's the best venue to swim as fast as you possibly can, and here he was going 21.1. So look, that 20.9, I think, yeah, I can't wait to see somebody get under that barrier, and I think he's right there with it. So exciting time. But we'll finish up here in terms of what's next after your break. I mean, leading into Paris, like what does it look like for you and Irish swimming?
Well, we're just waiting for final clarity on the Olympic qualification piece, particularly around the relays, because you know, the fact that you can qualify a certain number of relays in Fukuoka 2023, and then the majority of your relays in Doha 2024, and that's caused a little bit of concern around coaches and athletes worldwide. You know, there's something in there, I think, that needs to be addressed and looked at. So it's difficult to fully plan your summer of 2023 through to February, March 2024 until we get a definitive that says, this is it, we've changed it or we haven't changed it, that's the end. Once we have that, I think that we're in a better position to be able to plan. But as with most nations, you know, our focus is going to be on a World Championships next summer in Japan, a European Juniors for our younger guys, and then we springboard into what will be an Olympic qualification process. And we need the Fukuoka Doha question answered before we can fully write and announce our own Olympic qualification process, because that'll be key to, you know, what we do around relays. And the moment you start trying to qualify relays, you're talking about athletes to rest, and then are you asking them to rest when they've already qualified as individuals, and that kind of stuff that every nation will be looking at. So the short answer is Worlds in Japan. The longer answer is Paris 2024, but there's some questions to be asked and finalized before we can fully announce a process to get us to that meet. Yeah.
Well, we talked earlier in terms of, you know, goals and ambitions, and I guess maybe, you know, as I'm sitting here listening to you and kind of thinking about the career that you've had a massive influence on many young athletes, but also the world of swimming, and you continue to do that with all the different committees that you're on and you know, roles that you have. So, you know, thank you and congratulations on all the work you've done. You should be super proud of the career that you've had and continue to have, and the effect that you're having on world swimming is profound. So I appreciate everything you do, Jon.
I appreciate your comments, Brett. Thanks ever so much.
All right, mate. Take care. We'll speak to you soon.
All right. All the best.
Vasa has been the go-to training tool outside of the pool for over 30 years. Vasa's products are ideal for developing power and proper technique in your swimmer's catch. Add a few Vasa trainers to your pool deck, and it's like adding an extra lane to your swimming pool. Go to vasatrainer.com, use code BRED at checkout, and get 10% off anything from Vasa. Destro Swim Towers. Gain strength in the water with a tower of power. Save $150 per double swim tower by using code BRETT, B-R-E-T-T, at checkout. DestroMachines.com.